Just quieten down, baby.
Per capita export value.
Libraries. Minister, are you embarrassed by your behavior today?
There's a lot of bleeding hearts around.
Do you have the fortitude or the gonads to stand up and come across here and say that to me, you son of a bitch?
Just watch me.
He certainly went too far, Mr. Speaker, when I saw him stick his tongue out.
Contemptuous disregard.
More than a slab of bacon talking here.
The disappointment you also feel is my responsibility.
I lost my temper.
What is the nature of your thoughts?
The word was FART.
Hello and welcome to Canadian Politics is Boring. This is a very unexpected and special episode with a very special guest. I'm Reese, and with me is Jesse.
Hello.
Jesse is just woken up. He's in Montreal, and he looks exhausted.
If you're watching this on YouTube, which, I mean, we've got a very small, but for some bizarre reason, dedicated following on our YouTube channel of like a dozen or so people who they refuse to listen to it in any other way. So I'm like, all right, Reese is dedicated to putting up YouTubes for some reason. So if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I look zombified. I woke up. I did not get good sleep. I woke up like 10 minutes ago, man. So I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. I got to okay, let's just wake up. And if you're seeing the show down below, there's a person in a box.
Yeah, you might hear Rob just chuckling. Hey, this is Rob Goodman. Hello, Rob.
Hello,
Rob. I have a question for you. Do you have like a can like this of something?
Yeah, I've got. Let me grab one from the. Give me a sec. I'll grab one from the fridge.
Yeah.
Yes, Jesse wants you to do some ASMR.
This is going to be some dead air, but give me a sec.
Okay, that's fine. I'll introduce you while you're gone. It's fine.
Okay, great.
So Rob is the opposite of what me and Jesse are. He is an educated, informed, and experienced political insider. He's the assistant professor at the Department of Politics and Public Administration at Toronto Metropolitan University,
which apparently also goes by Ryerson. I found out.
It used to. They rebranded because Ryerson did bad things. And then in history. And then he's also worked as a speechwriter for U.S. House Majority Leader Steny in the U.S.
Don't open it yet.
And Senator Chris Dodd. So Rob, you're incredibly well experienced in American politics and Canadian academia and Canadian politics. But we want to hear you drink from a can, apparently.
Are you familiar with ASMR?
I've heard of it. I'm not like into that kind of corner of the internet, but tell me all about it.
So ASMR is you get the sound. I'm going to crank my microphone.
Okay, go for it.
Just three men on a camera listening to ASMR.
I'm gonna put this up to my headphone mic. I'm gonna crack it right here. All right. It might, if it explodes in my face, I'm gonna be really frustrated. Oh, hey. There we go.
Nice. There we go.
Cheers.
Nice long drink. Take a nice long slurp.
Yay. So, Rob, did I introduce you properly? Did I miss anything, or is there anything you want to add or correct?
That was all right. I'm glad you went into the Ryerson bit. When I was hired in 2019, it was Ryerson. Very quickly changed to TMU, which is what we're trying to go with. The administration's trying to push Toronto Met, but I don't think they're going to make that happen. So I think we're just we're TMU for the foreseeable future.
Kind of like the Sky Dome in Toronto, being the fucking Rogers Center. Yeah,
exactly. They're just you can't. Some things you can't force it from the top down.
No.
The people want TMU. Yeah,
that's fine. Well, it fits on a shirt easier as well.
Yeah, I think so. But no, Ryerson was. I didn't know much. This is part of my deal. Being an American who's been in American politics and came over here for the job, but also because my family sort of wanted to be here. And you discover that we don't have Confederate general statues in places like Toronto, but we do have Egerton Ryerson statues. And he did some things. We've got
some pretty problematic statues in Canada. They need to exist.
That's true. So he's done some things. They tore down a statue as the university was working on the renaming. And the university's like, oh, we have a committee. Hold on. We're working on this. But people took it into their own hands.
That's amazing.
A committee. I love that shit.
So you're American and you've now moved to Canada, and I feel like we have very different backgrounds, and I came from a different country, but we came to Canada for very similar reasons, I feel, because you I feel you find it, correct me if I'm wrong, from what I've read from the book that you're kind of you're releasing at the moment, a lot of it was you kind of felt a connection and a bond with the way Canadians live, civil society attitudes, that kind of thing, which is one of my main reasons of coming here. I was fully in Britain, which is slowly sinking into the ocean, in a metaphorical sense, not a literal one. So,
I wouldn't be surprised these days, to tell you the truth.
And I think our listeners in the US, I think, like who listen to our show, are often unaware of some of the bigger issues in Canada, and what our show talks about a lot of the time is the crazy stuff and the unhinged stuff that people don't always imagine happens here. So tell us a little bit about how you end up in Canada after like a career in DC and everything.
Yeah, so I was in politics in DC. I was a speechwriter in the Senate and the House. You mentioned Chris Dodd. I worked for Steny Hoyer, who's Nancy Pelosi's number 2. I was a speechwriter for a while, and then I went to grad school. I started studying political theory. I started working on the history of rhetoric, which is sort of my big interest after being a speechwriter.
The history of rhetoric.
Yeah, so I know it's incredibly like abstruse, but like I did an AMA on Reddit about this, and I told people, I used to be a speechwriter. I got into academia. Now I kind of study the history of it. And they're like, so you had a job doing it, and now you have a job teaching other people about the history of other people who've done this, and how's this a step up? So thanks, Reddit. I really
Reddit is so harsh.
Yeah,
that's really funny.
Just what to say, and clearly, like that.
It's like learning philosophy in university. The only thing you can do with a philosophy degree is teach philosophy to other people. But you took it a step further. You taught about other people who had done it. Like
it really is. And clearly that comment's been living rent free in my head for like 5 years now. So like, I didn't even know it was, honestly, I did not know it was still in there until it just came out. So that's great. But thanks. So
that's what we do.
When I started going on the job market and thinking about where to be and where to do this incredibly obscure specialty, I was really fortunate to get a postdoc at McGill, which is started our Canadian connection. And then I was really fortunate after that to get a job at then Ryerson, now TMU, teaching political theory. So part of it's just the kind of prosaic stuff of you go where the jobs are, especially in my world. But also, there's a little bit of, we did search especially hard here, me and my family. I had 2 girls. We moved. Now we have 3 girls. So wow. I thought about where I wanted to grow up, and like I really
what's that like? Raising 3 girls.
Well, right now it's a lot like raising 2 girls. We've got a 3-month-old, so she's a newborn. She's just sort of
right.
She's a 3-month-old. She'll kind of sleep. So I'm sure it's.
So you haven't discovered the pure chaos just yet. It's on its way.
Yet. There's a lot of nap time, but we know it's coming.
Enjoy the peace.
Yes, right.
I saw a quote once. Somebody asked somebody, "What does it feel like to have 3 kids?" And he's like, "Well, imagine you're drowning, and then someone hands you a baby."
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, sadly accurate. But no, I am in the phase where the baby right now just kind of sleeps and poops. So we're getting there. 2 girls is plenty on its own.
Just wait till they hit 14. Yeah. The nightmare.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh, and like
I'm so glad I don't
one
have
thing,
kids.
I pride myself on doing like all the things that parents are supposed to do, except I haven't learned how to braid hair yet. And one of my
that's
my
easy.
Oldest, I know I can do everything else, but like my oldest kid, who's 8 now, like she insists on not cutting her hair. It's down to her butt. She's never going to cut it. So braiding her hair is a process, and that's the one thing that I need to kind of like catch up on.
It's not hard.
I'm sure it's not. But also, we've talked about hand-eye coordination. I'm not sure if you've seen mine like that. Yeah.
Just got hair down to my butt too.
Yeah.
People wanted to braid my hair, so I kind of learned. It's not hard.
Okay.
Yeah, Jesse used to have really long hair.
It did.
Yeah.
Like super long. No, it wasn't.
Thanks.
It was a stupid mistake that I had for years, and no one bothered telling me.
That's what we've all told her. We bothered to tell her a lot. She just makes her more and more stubborn.
So, Rob, we hear today because you've reached out to us because you've written a book called Not Here, Why American Democracy is Eroding and How Canada Can Protect Itself. Which, and when I read
is a rodent?
Eroding.
Oh, eroding. Okay.
Right. Not a rodent. But when I read that title, my emotional response was like, oh, wow, you've kind of written down something that people probably feel and worry about sometimes. Jesse probably doesn't because he doesn't worry too much about stuff like this. But people who are kind of into politics and what's going on in the US and what it means for Canada. And when you see like a borderless kind of far right in Canada and the US kind of interacting, when I read it, I was like, oh, well, great. Someone's looking into this. Phew. So tell us a bit about the book and where you got the idea from.
Yeah, so I think where I got the idea from was my experience, first of all, of making this international move, which I know as far as international move goes is pretty trivial. It's like the easiest one you can do, fine. But still, being at a bit of a remove and watching most of the Trump years unfold from the relative safety of Montreal and Toronto, and then being aware of how much the Canadians that we became friends with are focused on American politics and how aware everyone is of this sort of dumpster fire that's going on in the late Trump years, the first impeachment, the second impeachment, January 6th, the 3 indictments and counting. Like this is like we all in Canada and the US, this is all the background that we all just kind of live with. But I guess I started thinking about, I had a similar reaction to you, is that it struck me as a somewhat more functional country. It struck me as a country where there's still something like a public sphere and a sense of a public good that is not quite as eroded as it is in American politics. And I got this sense that, to the extent that I can help, which I know is not that much, but to the extent that I can help, it's saying like, in the US, there have been some major screw ups along the way. There have been some major missed turns and sort of tragic circumstances that have gotten to the U.S. at this point, where we almost had a coup in the U.S. We might have a coup sometime soon again. Who knows? And to the extent that I can say, like, hey, Canadians, in this country, we're not exempt from this sort of stuff. We're not exempt from these politics, these trends, the power of the global far right and the global authoritarian movements. All this stuff is a power here. But I thought about how to best get that message across. And what I tried to focus on was focusing on, I want to be real about the threat. I want to be real about what it means to live next to an eroding democracy and how that upends a lot of what I think we take for granted here in Canada, in this country. And yet I also wanted to leave people with a sense of, the opposite of despair and doom and gloom and the kind of doom scrolling that's all too easy to get into. I also wanted this book to have an opportunity to say, like, there are some reasons why the far right isn't quite as powerful here as it is in the U.S. It's not just because Canada's behind the U.S. chronologically. It's not because of coincidence. There might be some reasons for it. And if we can unpack those, then maybe we can understand a little bit better what Canada can do to stop going down the road the U.S. has gone down. So I see my perspective sometimes as I've come from a place where this process of erosion, of democratic backsliding, or whatever you want to call it, is pretty far advanced. And I really want to say, while there's still time, like, we can still do something about this here, but we've got to pay more attention. And that's kind of what motivated me to write this book in the first place.
I'm glad you put like a positive note at the end, like a call to action on things people can do. Because sometimes you read books or like films with like bleak endings. I guess we're fucked. It's like that's kind of sorry, go on.
Oh, because I was talking to a really interesting Facebook conversation. Remember when we used to have interesting Facebook conversations?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember this. Too long ago.
But it was about, what motivates people to do better, to pay attention to these things. And I don't think this is like a crazy radical point, but I think it's that it's striking the balance between this is a real problem, but there's also real reasons not to despair about it. And there's real reasons to feel like we have some agency here. And I really think like threading that needle, like, from everything from democratic erosion to climate change to the housing crisis to whatever it is, like that needle is such a hard needle to thread, but it's so important. And I try to do it in the book. So when people ask me about the book, so where do you come down? Are we screwed or not? I'm like, I hate to be that guy. And I hate to be that kind of professor who just says, well, it's complicated, but it's complicated. And I tried to make the book like that on purpose.
Do people kind of come and walk up to you in the street and go, Professor, are we
Are we fucked?
I wish I had that kind of name recognition, but not anytime soon.
Hopefully they will. Hopefully they will.
Yeah, right.
So,
Right.
one of the things you talked about in the book was Canadian localism versus nationalism. Now, obviously, like, could you kind of talk about that a bit, because it's less about kind of defining yourself in more negative, like, right-wing terms. What does Canadian localism mean, I guess?
Yeah, thanks for picking up on that. So I guess what I was trying to think about in the book was, what does Canada have going for it? Well, what's its democratic immune system? And at a time when the U.S., yeah, right, I know. But at a time when the U.S. is in such deep trouble, can I say such deep shit on this show? I guess.
Yeah, you can say what.
Oh my God,
please. Nice.
Yeah.
At a time when it's in such deep shit, I do feel like emphasizing what makes Canada distinct from the U.S. and what gives it a different set of democratic traditions is a positive thing we can do. So that's step one. But step two is saying, well, how do we think about this? Is this a project of Canadian nationalism? Is this saying to say we're going to be kind of rah jingoist for Canada? And I'm really not going down that road. I don't want to go down that road in the book. One, because I do think of myself as a person on the left. I do think of myself as someone who does not really have time for those right-wing versions of nationalism. And also because it's not surprising that nationalism goes in that exclusive kind of direction, because it's connected to defining like who's a member of the nation and who's just visiting, who's real and who's not, who's a actual Canadian and a not actual Canadian. And that stuff is poisonous, right? And I talk about that in the book. So I'm like, I need another word for expressing this sense of pride in institutions and distinctiveness without saying some people belong and some people don't. So I decided to use localism, which I know is a bit of a stretch because obviously it's not a farmer's market. We're not shopping local. We're not buying our kind of $7 apples here.
Organic, homegrown democracy.
But, I'm gonna, right. But what I like about it is one, I'm a Latin nerd going back to my academic background. So nationalism comes from the Latin word for birth. Localism comes from the Latin word for place. It's natus versus locus. And what I like about place is this idea that anyone can be from a place. Anyone can be part of a place. Anyone can become part of a place over time. And that's different than saying
that's kind of what Canada's thing is. We're a melting pot of everybody. This is why people, the long going joke is like, no one is going to bomb Canada because this is where everybody's cousins live.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So I do feel like, yes, it is where everybody's cousins live, and I met a lot. But yeah, I'm not sure if the word's going to catch on. But what I was interested in was
the Latin phrase. Probably not.
No, that's not going to get. I have no illusions about the average voter out there. But I like localism, like who knows? But what I'm trying to express with that idea is this idea of having a sense of justified, reasonable, not jingoistic, kind of blind pride in what's going well without being exclusive and obnoxious about it. And that's a really hard needle to thread, but that's kind of why I thought I might need a different word for it.
Honestly, I kind of like get a sense of it. So, like, growing up in the UK and having lived in the UK, where there's an incredibly like poisonous attitude to immigration, to the point where people protest, the Coast Guard when they're trying to rescue boats of immigrants out of the ocean to say no, leave them there. Is a really, really unpleasant mindset to come to Canada as an immigrant. And people just go, hey, welcome home. I was like, I've been here like 5 minutes and you're already telling me that you instantly feel like they're like, I don't give the fuck where you're from, but you've moved here and you're paying taxes and you got a house and your kids are playing on the street. So you're home, I guess you're Canadian now. And I never like, that's one of the big appeals it was how like there was no baggage. It was just kind of like, but as long as you're nice and you kind of like follow the rules and you're good to each other and you don't smash any windows, then you're a Canadian kind of thing. So I really like that. That's part of the attraction. I don't want to oversell it because I'm sure it's like, you get into this thing every time. Are we overselling it? Or are we being honest? But I've had a similar experience, and I know, like I said, I made the easiest possible immigration that there is in the world. I went from the U.S. to Canada as a white dude, so like I get that it's easy for me. But I've sensed that attitude as well, and I really like. Theresa May got a shout out in my book for the go home or face arrest trucks. So I know what you're talking about, and I come from a long heritage of that in the U.S. So I instantly recognize that dynamic.
What's your favorite section of your book? The part that you're most proud of, and if you could one area.
That's such a question of someone who hasn't read the book. What's the best bit?
Tell me about your book.
Which page should I skip to?
Well, I do have an answer to that. I like chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Solidarity. And chapter 3 is about the kind of connection between the public sphere, public goods, having a public sphere that works, having public schools and public hospitals, and stuff like publicly funded or subsidized childcare, mat leave, all these things that are basically they're not separate from democracy is what I was trying to say in that part of the book. And this is I liked it because this is the part of the book where I got to put on my little bit more leftist hat and talk about the economic equality dimension to it. That I think, as a political theorist, my view about these things is that we need them for democracy. One, because they teach people how to look at each other as equals. Like, I go to that school drop off, doesn't matter that my house is kind of falling apart because it's old and that's all you can afford in a housing crisis. Doesn't matter that some people live in very fancy refurbished square houses, as we call them. Doesn't matter that a lot of people live in the public housing projects that are near the school. Like, you drop off your kid at school drop off, you stand in line with a bunch of other people. You have that in common. You both have an interest in making sure that public good works for everyone. Now, I get, and this is again threading that needle, I get that Ontario has to do with Doug Ford and driving QP workers on strike, and I get that class sizes are out of control, and I get that the public sphere isn't what it used to be in living memory. So I'm not trying to be, kind of rose-colored glasses about the public sphere here in Canada, about these public goods, but I am trying to say they were relatively good in living memory. They still beat out the U.S. in a lot of ways, and they still give people this sense that we have a stake in democracy beyond just the word. Because, the thing that really stresses me out about U.S. politics is not just the way that I see the kind of far-right authoritarian folks like Trump, obviously being the bigger threat to democracy, but I'm also worried by center-left types like Biden and here Justin Trudeau, who are very concerned to use democracy as a campaign slogan, and are very concerned to tell you that democracy is on the ballot. But there often isn't the substantive dimension, like, what do we do? Like, so what? And why should we care? And then chapter 3, there's this part where I'm talking about public goods and how it's connected to democracy. That's kind of my how we should care chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. I think like the idea as well that I suppose there's a lot of people in the US who don't really use the government for much. If your healthcare is already kind of privatized and that's connected to your job, if you send your kids to private school, if you kind of, there's a lot of people who don't have those similar touch points, I guess, in the same way. And I think like the way tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is as well, if you live in a rich area, you pay more taxes to the schools in that area than a poor area where the schools are less well funded, whereas that doesn't quite work the same in Canada. So you don't have that kind of localized inequality or the inequality difference. I don't know if that's the same across the whole of the US, but I know in some places is something that does happen.
So I'll give you an example of this. So, like, as you said, like that is accurate in the US, and I'm sure there's some jurisdictions that are exceptions, but in general, the rule is that schools are funded by local property taxes. So schools in richer neighborhoods are better resourced, and the rich schools in the U.S. are comparable with like any school in the world. They're excellent schools. The U.S. does really well at the top of the income bracket. What it doesn't do well on is any sense of equity. And of course, that's tied to the histories of racism and segregation in the U.S. But
totally,
I talked to back when I was in Montreal. I talked to a friend who was a professor at McGill, and she said she grew up in she was a first generation Canadian. She grew up in in some public housing in BC with immigrant parents. And she was saying, her school was a public school. It was funded just as well as a rich kid school in Vancouver. And that allowed her to kind of get the education to go on and become a McGill professor. Like, this kind of stuff is this kind of social mobility. The U.S. used to be really good at it. It could still conceivably be good at it again. Right now, not so much. Right now, it's polarizing around income, race, residence, zip code, so on. Sure, Canada's polarizing in the same way, but there's a little bit more living memory of it doesn't really have to be this way, guys. And still, as you said, like, schools are funded in a still kind of more equitable way. Like, I love my kids' public school, and it is a public school that is directly across from the housing project. And that's exactly what public school is supposed to do. It's supposed to take the people like me who live in overpriced houses. It's supposed to take the public housing kids, and it's supposed to say, you guys live in this country together, figure it out. And there are places in the U.S. that still have that, but less so.
Speaking of polarization, so just out of curiosity, I was curious about your opinion on this. So in the States, there's a separation of needs between municipal and rural that is already present in Canada. Do you see the concept of like blue and red states migrating north to Canada in terms of left and right provinces?
Yeah, in some sense. I mean, there's obviously the kind of the fact that the Liberals, with the last election or maybe even the last two, they don't win a seat between BC and Winnipeg, I think. And I'm not sure if that was the last couple, but of course, there's kind of this perennial issue of Western alienation of provinces like Alberta that are defining themselves as kind of offshoots of U.S. style conservatism. I saw this person writing about Daniel Smith the other day, and how she made some comments where she described the powers that she thought that she had as Premier of Alberta that turned out to be the powers that a Republican governor would have in the U.S., but are just different under a different system of government. And I think that, and there's the famous the famous comment from one of the people who was brought into court after the Ottawa truck blockade, along the lines of, "I just thought I was exercising my First Amendment rights," and the judge said, "Which First Amendment?"
So it means something. There is a First Amendment in Canada, but it means something totally different, I think.
Oh, right, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to say that question that I asked is from my friend Andrew Howie. I texted him and asked him, like, please send me a question that'll make me sound really smart.
so like, and that's the thing we want to do with this podcast, is that like it's one of the key things is like talking about politics, but like in a way that uninformed people like us can kind of like comprehend these ideas and everything. And like Jesse's role is always been kind of, you care about stuff, you do care about the issues, Jesse, but it's the mechanics of democracy and politics that frustrate you more than anything. So
it's only frustrating because to me the system is like maybe definitely less so in Canada than in the States. But the system is insanely, intensely broken, and we're being pleaded with to please care about a system that isn't working. It just isn't working, you know, and that to me is the frustrating part. Like, okay, kids, get in the car and there's no tires on the car and there's no gas in the car. And we're like, why, Dad? The car is clearly not going anywhere. And all he's doing is just begging us to please care and get in the car. And we're like, why? That's not going anywhere. That's the frustration I feel, is like whenever I talk to people who are really in the know, they're so passionate about like, we got to do something. I'm like, yes, we do. But what we're doing clearly isn't fucking working and hasn't for a long time.
No, Jesse, I wanted to add to your point though, that as someone who was born in Canada and you haven't lived a long time in any other country, like as someone who's come to Canada, like from Europe, and other people I speak to have come to Canada from other places.
Oh, others like Brexit in the States, they're insane.
But but honestly, like a lot of people would be like, Canada is still doing so much right in comparison. It's not perfect. Like there's some terrible shit that's gone on, and there's some big problems that need to be overcome. But largely speaking, like life in Canada, like my parents would say about like my kids, like they miss them, but they're so happy they're growing up here because of how it feels and the way the government is. So even though it is you got a point, but even in relative terms, and I don't know, Rob, whether you agree with that or not, but to me, I'm like, it's like slightly better than everywhere else.
Yeah,
I agree with that, Reese, for sure. Yeah,
I mean, sure, like you said that, I think a second ago you were talking about how we're all kind of sinking, and I agree. We're all sinking. We're sinking at different rates, and I think the reason we're sinking are some big global things that have to do with neoliberalism and capitalism and some big abstract words.
I agree.
So totally. We're all sinking in different ways. But, I think about, I talked about this in another interview. When I think about what I like that there's like more union density here. I like that it's not crazy to be a unionized professor or grad student, which is just my world. I mean, that's not the biggest world. I like that, Doug Ford tried to take away collective bargaining rights from education workers.
What does that
mean?
Huge
strike. Oh well, he tried to. So then he was trying to impose a contract basically on these school janitors essentially and early childhood educators, like the people that are not the certified teachers in my kids' JK class, but the people are the teachers' aides and the janitors and the lunch people.
So Doug Ford to impose
stop them from striking. Stop them from being able to strike.
Right,
Oh,
right.
fucking
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So it's like, you can't strike. Here's your contract. To which they said, screw you, we're striking anyway. And I went and I took my kids, and it was great because it was Queen's Park. That's like a streetcar
awesome.
ride. And you know what? He backed down, and I just like, I know Doug Ford is Doug Ford, but
Yeah.
the reason that I find a little bit of optimism in Doug Ford is not because he's so great, but because he backs down because things like organized labor still have a little fight in them here that I couldn't see like a Republican governor in a populous state in the U.S. backing down like that.
Wow.
And again, it's not because Doug Ford's so great. It's because you've got a little bit more power on the side of organized labor to make him back down. And that's
Right.
just, I think about that as a microcosm. Like, yeah, we're all sinking. We all have Doug Fords everywhere. The question is like, is there a reasonable hope of pushing back in some places, like a little more than others?
Mm.
I mean, I like the optimism. I do. I just, as Reese pointed out, someone who's like, I'm not into politics. I don't understand a lot of the terms. I can see a smoking wreck of a car that's on fire, and without being a mechanic, I can tell you that car is broken. And that's kind of how I feel about our political system. But like, I still feel like we need to make giant changes from within the system before seeing systemic, like really positive systemic changes, like lobbying. That's gotta fucking go, man. That's insane that's even a legal thing. Okay, it's gotta go. Like, just fucking hell.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you a story from my U.S. politics days.
Please.
I'm not going to say who this guy was lobbying for, because that would get me in trouble. But I had a nice desk. It had a nice view. I was very lucky because I worked at the Capitol building for like a year and a half. So I had a nice view. I think I go out for lunch, and I come back, and a lobbyist has come to visit my my boss while I was out. And I guess he kind of fancies the view from my desk. So I come back, he literally is sitting in my chair with his feet up on my desk, just kind of like looking out the window, doing his thing. Like, that is, they literally think they own this place.
What a metaphor.
Yeah, right? It was perfect.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and again, I'm sure it's no different here. I'm sure Canadian political staffers have equivalent stories here. But like, wow, it was just so on the nose. I was actually kind of grateful for him for like giving me such a great metaphor.
I did have a question. Sorry, Reese. It sounds like you were going to say something.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Go on.
I just wanted to get your opinion on the the left versus the right sort of insanity. I have thoughts on this that are probably unpopular. So you've got we got basically five different sort of power struggles, and I'm going to say this is anywhere in any country. So you've got.
Is this an official Jesse theory?
This is an official Jesse theory. Oh, wow. Yeah, okay. This is not official.
We need like a musical sting or something.
Please, and get like a little. Give me some like some 50s sort of infomercial music.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Reese does that. So you've got the left, you've got the far left, you've got the right, you've got the far right, and then you've got the corrupt.
What about the center at number 6?
Oh yeah, okay, the center. Yeah. So the left, the far left, the center, the right, the far right, and then the corrupt. And the corrupt are really at the crux of most of the problems, because if you look at the spectrum of far right to far left, really despite how we feel, despite where we land on this spectrum, I'm left, I'm not far left. But I believe that we need everybody on this spectrum at the same time. We need more understanding and less fighting, less like, fuck you, be on my side, or you can go to hell. Like, that's not helping anybody anywhere. Clearly, it just doesn't fucking work. And like the mentalities of left versus right is kind of simple if you want to break it down into really, really simple components. The left is care about others before you care about yourself. Care about your community first. Care about your tribe first. You know, make sure that other people around you are well taken care of. And the right is the opposite, which is put your own oxygen mask on first before helping other people. It's about me, my well-being, my financial well-being, my family's financial well-being. And then once we've got that taken care of, then we can look at other people. And the dichotomy between the two enrages both sides so much, right, that it's insane. But the reality is you need both to have a functioning society, and we need more understanding. And I feel like if we don't get rid of the fucking or deal with the corrupt who are playing both sides against each other like this insane wrestling match just to benefit themselves, right, then nothing is going to change. And it's going to look like an us versus them system forever, when really it should be an us with them.
Right.
System.
And I think that's right on. I like the way you express that. And like,
thank you.
You know, we were talking about the Justin Trudeau kind of culture war stuff and the recent kind of Barbie social media photo before we hit record. And I was thinking about that, and I was just like, this is
that
not.
Question was mine, not Howie's, by the way.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Thank you.
But I was thinking, like, you know, there's so much of politics is culture war. Some of this is left versus right struggle that you're talking about is people getting clicks on social media, or people just hating in order to hate.
Yeah.
And I feel like to the extent that we start making politics about concrete stuff, material stuff, quality of life, like actual tangible quality of life stuff. And that's the thing I talk about in the book a little bit as well. This idea that the more politics can be about that, the more constructive it can be. You know, I think about, it's easy to do part of the corruption I think you talk about, and how corruption feeds into this polarization is this idea that a lot of people in social media, in traditional media, you know, what have you, make a lot of money off of making people hate each other, making people see each other as enemies, right? Instead of recognizing that we've got a lot of material interests in common. Like, I do not care if Justin Trudeau goes to Barbie wearing a pink hoodie. I don't care if people on the right make fun of his pink hoodie. I care about I've got a 3-month-old kid. That kid's going to daycare. I next year. I need to know if that daycare is going to be $10 a day daycare, or if it's going to be half price daycare, or if we're going to be paying for, you know, insane out of pocket expenses just so my partner and I can work. That's the kind of concrete thing, and it's harder to get up on your high horse. It's harder to be kind of ideological about. There's a lot of more. It's technical. There's nuts and bolts. There's room for negotiation, but it's a lot harder to kind of get social media clicks out of the concrete stuff. But the concrete stuff is where that stuff is possible. And it doesn't mean that we're all going to agree. It doesn't mean that, like, if we just got rid of social media and the culture war, well, then everyone would have exactly the same politics as I do. Because I know that's not going to happen.
No.
But there's something, but you can have an argument. You can have a real argument over how much can we afford to pay, or how much is it worth it to pay so that this guy can send his kid to daycare.
Yeah. I feel like the next Canadian election is going to be the most balls out culture war election ever, because
so
even
stupid.
like Trudeau, even like posted in that picture with his son, like it's just someone going to watch a popular hit movie with his son, and they're both wearing pink because that's the colors of Barbie, and he posted it. He knew he was going to get a reaction, and everyone exploded on the internet about it. But at the same time, you got Polyev, who does the same thing from almost the opposite position, where, you know, he does those signals to people where you kind of read between the lines and everything. Like, how do you feel about now? You know, obviously you've identified that, and I kind of don't like it, because I grew up in a place where who you voted for is based on where you were born rather than kind of anything else. So I grew up in an area where if you didn't vote Labour, you would be disowned, which isn't like a healthy democracy necessarily. It's very tribal. And I kind of feel I don't like the way this election is going to go next. It's less civil and much more based on those kind of raw emotions. Yeah. How do you feel about it, Rob, as someone who's trying to, you know, stepped away from the US where that is more prevalent too?
Yeah. And I'm really I'm annoyed to see it as prevalent here as well. And I guess the thing that, you know, I try to focus on what is potentially within my control, not control, but like what I could have any kind of influence over. I know that I'm not going to make the far right stop being crazy, and I'm not going to make them stop being the far right.
Hey, the far left is just as crazy, man.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And it's funny because I think of myself, sometimes I think of myself as a leftist, and I meet an actual leftist. I'm like, oh, You have piercing eyes I didn't even know about.
Yeah.
But I will say the thing so I try to focus on people that will potentially listen to me, like I center-left people, Democrats in the U.S., that kind of stuff. And I think that what annoys me about the way that the center-left plays into this kind of cultural war politics is that it's so easy and so rewarding, and apparently it works, to say, like, I'm just not that guy. Biden can say it about Trump. Trudeau's trying really hard to say it about Poilievre. He's got this new kind of line about seriousness, and I think he's apparently poll tested that. I think he's going to be we're going to hear a lot of that word in the next federal election. Serious. He's not serious. You need a serious leader for serious times.
Whatever works for him, I guess.
Whatever.
So that's Trudeau's line. Is Trudeau's saying that he's serious?
I'm serious. Yeah. So it's just going to be this. It's going to be this vote for me because I'm not that. And
that's been around forever, though.
I know.
Vote for me because I'm not him. You know, it's ridiculous.
And that's the thing, that it annoys me so much. And I really wanted to say, like, there's space to get beyond that. But I think part of the reason that the Trudeaus and the Bidens go back to this playbook is because so far it's been working okay. Biden wins, Trudeau holds off challenges from the right. I'm not sure what's going to happen in this next election, but it doesn't move the ball down the pitch. And look at me using a Britishism because I'm trying to be a good guest, but it doesn't move the ball down the pitch or the gridiron or what have you. It doesn't actually get to any of the substantive stuff, but it's so easy to keep the conversation there because it benefits everyone, except me, who's paying a good quarter to a half of his paycheck to put his kid in the daycare that's oversubscribed and has a wait list.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I hear people describe Trudeau as a great politician, but a bad leader, in the sense he knows how to play the game, but he doesn't necessarily. He's more interested in the game than the role of prime minister and what that means. And I kind of I guess that I find Poilievre and not because he's on the right, just the way that the things he's said and the things he does say and the association he makes with people and kind of the symbolism that he puts in there, it just makes me kind of shiver. And I kind of
he really does come across as like an actual sociopath.
But then
really, he might honestly be like. But
then at the same time, Trudeau is so there's such a blind spot, I feel, where he's almost to the point where he can't see that the country, a lot of people, like a lot of middle class people from all different economic backgrounds, are finding it harder, and that's enough to make people who vote for him not turn up or switch or whatever. That he's kind of potentially by not stepping back from the role and kind of stepping down, that he's putting his own interest before the country's interest, if he really believed in his principles, to acknowledge that maybe he's not the best person right now to be in charge of the country or fight with the Liberals, and to kind of, because also it would instantly disarm a lot of Poilievre as being so anti-Trudeau. If Trudeau stepped back, he would then they'd have to start from square one again, building a new boogeyman for everything that's wrong with Canada. So I kind of feel like he's kind of, I don't know what kind of point I'm making. I guess it's just an instinct that I think I'm worried that this election is going to go. It'll probably end up being a minority conservative government. That's where I kind of feel.
That's interesting.
That's my prediction, which means they won't be able to do much, but they'll still be able to do quite a lot.
Can I ask, how is that going to work though? Because who's going to I thought all the parties, all the smaller parties are committed to not go with the bloc. Maybe keep them in power in exchange for something.
I don't know. Maybe they would if they would they just had to sign up to being really preferential to Quebec and their kind of demands for the province. I don't know how it would work, but at the same time they'd have to work with other people to pass anything, I guess. But that's my Reese's hot prediction. Music sting.
Reese's hot prediction.
because Trudeau, and even then, I think if Trudeau lost, he still wouldn't resign necessarily. Because his dad lost after 10 years and then won another term a few years later.
Here's the thing. If I'm Trudeau, though, I just feel like you've got this just kind of life beckoning out for you there as kind of international celebrity. You
exactly.
could join the Obama ranks. He and Obama are going to have a podcast. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
God,
exactly.
That's my hot prediction.
Honestly,
can you imagine the Obama? Yeah,
I would listen. That'd be crazy. The Trudeau Obama podcast, all good times to a slow jazz backtrack.
Poly Bros, they could call it.
Oh yeah, So
But-
I just feel like when that's beckoning to you, like it's got to be hard to like show up for another day of work in Ottawa in February.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt, I'm just like his brand outside of Canada is like the polar opposite of what it is in Canada at the moment. Like everybody loves him. They're like, why can't we have a sexy young leader?
It's just because he's attractive. Like, that's it. It's the States. That's all. The States prioritizes looks above all else. It's insane.
Yeah. I will say, like, one thing that I Polyev, like I it's funny because I teach a class on like basically political rhetoric, and one of the things I had my students do was, why don't you show a speech from a recent politician, discuss it, talk about the strategies and all that. And someone showed Polyev's acceptance speech when he won the Conservative nomination. And the funny thing is, I have this weird kind of tick about consuming political news. I read it all the time. I'm social media, CBC, all that kind of stuff. I don't watch a lot of videos, so I've never really seen him give a full length speech. And I was like, when he knows he's in front of a big audience, he can tone those things down and look very presentable when he wants to for a small amount of time. And I'm concerned that in like this kind of 4 to 5 week election campaign, he's going to be able to make himself look like just sort of a average, approachable sort of politician, because most people have very little preconceived notion of him that aren't obsessed with politics already, and those people have already kind of made up their minds. Right. So I'm not concerned about how he's going to be able to present himself as sort of an anti-Trudeau.
Well, also he just put a video out like last night of him, is narrated by his wife. And it's kind of talking about the softer side of him, and he's pushing his kids on the swing, and they're doing a puzzle together, and he's kind of going for like the soft, gooey center of who he is and everything.
Look, everyone, I too am human.
Yeah. All I was thinking, I want to do a re-edit where we just go basically say, look, he's pushing a baby on a swing. It's his baby, I'm guessing. He didn't borrow one. But
I mean, you don't know.
We'll just on the voiceover go, Pierre Polyev, he won't eat that baby. Justin would.
It's funny though, because this is like going back to Canadian U.S. politics. So DeSantis, I just saw this ad that he had when he was running for governor of Florida the first time. Similar kind of humanizing thing, like playing with his kids on the floor, except he was playing Legos with his kids. And then he got the kid to say, "Build the wall, Daddy." And
wow.
That poor kid. Second of all, like, and maybe it was DeSantis, but anyway, he involved this kid in this kind of build the wall Lego kind of exercise. And
amazing.
God, the level of like you like that's not even concealing the sociopathy.
No. Your kids, just be nice to your kids. Is it Ted Cruz did that? I don't know if you remember. He did some filming with his family that was supposed to be that. Look, look here I am with my family, and we're so regular and normal, and
we're just so regular. We're just a regular, normal human family.
But then someone leaked the raw footage of Ted Cruz's like shoot essentially with his family, and he's basically trying to like get his kids and family to act normal.
They don't want it.
And I know cameras, like when you introduce cameras to a situation, it freaks everyone out and nobody acts normal. But even like the interactions with his wife, where he's like trying to get her to kiss him and stuff like that. And some people just did.
Please love me, please.
Yeah. It's all on YouTube. Check it out because it's so excruciatingly painful. But just to come back to your book, which is kind of you don't want to talk about your book, but the one of the things you talk about as well is the idea that Canada is like there's an economic dependency. There's like a codependency between US and Canada, and that can also be a conduit for this kind of the principles and ideas that have eroded American democracy. You talked about Canada kind of building relationships and becoming a middle power and influence in other places. So what would you say is the best way for people who are worried that all these kind of ideas and things are flowing over and kind of, going to take up all the space in Canada in terms of political ideas and everything? What are your thoughts around like how we can kind of make sure it flows the other way too, I guess?
Yeah. So this is sort of a big kind of, it's sort of like a high level and maybe vague thought. And I'm not sure like how well I can translate it into kind of the policy, what people do. But this is what I was trying to spell out in this part of the book that you're talking about, which is obviously, Canada and the U.S. are exceptionally economically intertwined. Obviously, the Canadian economy is incredibly vulnerable to what happens in the U.S. By the way, the couple of times that I've done, I occasionally as a quote unquote expert, I do kind of media. People always want to know about Joe Biden and America First policies. They want to know about auto tariffs, about softwood tariffs. Like this is life, or not life or death, but it's livelihoods for people.
Right.
So this has obviously been like a huge theme of Canadian history. I talk a little bit about in the book about one of the last times Canada grappled with this in the 70s, about Mitchell Sharp and the third option paper, trying to make the case for more economic separation from the U.S., kind of as a matter of cultural and political independence. It obviously didn't work out, and Canada ended up going the other way under the Mulroney government. But the big picture thing I try to spell out here is the economic dependence. Like, Canada can try and should try to diversify, because I think exposure to trade is exposure to illiberal ideas if you're trading within a liberal country or an eroding country. But also, like, economics is not the only place the game is. I think that there's a lot of kind of economic determinism in the way people think about the Canada-U.S. relationship specifically, thinking like, look, Canada's always going to be subject to American political trends, always going to be subject to American political influence, because the economies are so intertwined, and that's where the action is. Everything is downstream of economics. And I guess I'm trying to say in the book, like, culture matters, politics matter, history matters. There are lots of examples of people thinking about ways to be more active about how they shape their own society's culture or their own nation's culture beyond the economic. So it's important, for instance, that, well, it's not that important, but there are things in Canada like a coffee crisp bar or the ketchup chips or whatever it is that aren't available in the U.S., and people kind of latch onto these things as symbols of pride. But these things are, the thing is, like, when you think about economics as where the action is, you get this kind of ridiculousness of latching onto consumer goods as a thing that defines Canadian identity. I'm trying to say in the book, like
room temperature donair sauce.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, just from Halifax, baby.
That's right. We had a donair place in Toronto that just opened, and I was like, this is really sweet. I'm like, I don't even know what is going on here.
Oh, really?
But
They couldn't get it. They couldn't get it right.
I don't know. I was in New York before this, so I've got I love the New York halal card style. But my point was, like, the consumer stuff is all interesting, and I get that people put a lot of their identity there. But there's so many other things that could support the sense of distinctiveness, and that we don't have to go down that road that the U.S. has gone down. And it's not all in the economic realm. So the economic realm is a big deal, but it's also really easy to be fatalistic about it and say, well, because the economies are so intertwined, we're just going to sink and swim, rise or fall, float or sink, I guess, with whatever happens in the U.S. See, this is what happens when you have a beer while you're doing a podcast.
There you go.
No, it's fine. It's encouraged. It's encouraged.
Yeah.
It's all good.
It's afternoon. It's fine.
Yeah. I always say though that, like, if you think of an actor you like in an American movie, there's a good chance they're Canadian anyway. So, like, there's so many cultural influences that Canada. It goes kind of both ways, I guess.
Yeah.
There was a story during the pandemic, and that I heard about the fact that when Trudeau and Trump were kind of interacting, where Trump basically said to 3M about not exporting any more masks outside of the US, which would have cut Canada off from a supply of masks. And then there was a conversation between Trudeau and Trump. Trudeau basically saying, well, all of the raw materials that go to the 3M factories come from Canada. So we don't make us masks. We're not going to send you the stuff you need to make the masks. Yeah.
That's funny.
Which to me kind of sums up that relationship. It's kind of, it works both ways in so many.
I had this,
that's really funny.
Yeah. I had this moment of a sort of unearned Canadian superiority kind of in the early days of the pandemic, when there was a period, I think before Omicron, I'm not even sure how many waves we ended up with. But there was a period in which, the numbers in Canada were much less severe than they were in the U.S. Before Omicron. And my mom in the U.S. Sent us a package of kind of nice N95 masks to take care of ourselves and the family, and I appreciated that. But we're like, oh, we don't have that here. No big deal. We're going to drop it off the hospital. So we donated all these to the hospital, which I felt good about. And then, like, the next wave hits, and I felt a little less smug. And then wondering where I was going to get my N95 mask. So I realized that's the price you pay for overestimating the differences.
Interesting.
No, exactly. Yeah. I think the kind of sometimes the Canadian superior attitude, and also sometimes the American attitude of going, well, if it all falls apart, I'll move to Canada. I think sometimes people aren't looking close enough at Canada to just kind of realize that that's not an easy option necessarily. So.
No, absolutely not. And I really want to be like, whenever people ask, so are you here because of politics? I get that sometimes. Like, are you the guy, did you literally crash the immigration website? Like, were you the guy that got the immigration website before it crashed on the night that Trump got elected? And I have to like, no, I promise it was a job. I promise I had legitimate gainful employment. But that's the kind of thing that does come up occasionally, because I think Americans do kind of, it's the grass is always greener syndrome. It's the other. And I think there's a lot of kind of not well thought out. And I was trying to say, like, when I was writing the book, I was saying, well, how much, is there any truth to this at all? Is there a difference that can be good and positive for democracy? Is there something? And I think there is something. But it's complicated. It's not nearly clear cut. What's that?
I was just asking what it would be.
Well, I talk about a couple of things in the book. I think like one, like tradition of not having a single real Canadian people. I like that it's got traditions of multiple peoples, multiple stories. But that's good for immigration, lack of kind of white populism, so on. I like that parliamentary government like beats presidential systems by a ton, and that's not even. To the extent that we have facts, we don't have a lot of facts in political science, but to the extent there's something that political scientists agree on, almost everyone agrees on that. I guarantee if you poll political scientists, Canada's doing a better job with the parliamentary system. And I talked a little bit about the public sphere, the things like the unions, the slightly better public goods here that gives some kind of basis to fight back. And those things are, they're not everything, but they're a little bit more than... at least it's not Trump, so I'm going to crash the immigration website on election night.
That's amazing. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a really fun time. Rob, I do have a question for you for our last question you have for the show. So
is this from your friend? Is this from your friend, Jesse?
No, it's just from me. Yeah. What advice would you give our listeners if they wanted to build a better system of government and like action that they themselves could take other than go vote?
Yeah, well, New Zealand has a really good and open immigration policy, so I suggest looking into it. Other than go vote, I would say, and I'm not sure if this is going to make me sound too left, but like join a union. Like if your workplace is unionized, make sure you're in that union. Go to your meetings, and again, this is like I should be clear that I need to do a better job of going to my meetings, but show up at your meetings, like show up at the picket line. If there's a picket line, don't cross it. Work with other unions. If someone's unionizing your workplace, like figure out how you can help. Figure out, vote for it. Obviously, if there's a union poll. And in my world, the world of political science, we're going to have a major conference in LA. Maybe you've seen a little bit of stuff about this on Twitter, or maybe not, because I'm just very insular. But there's a huge strike of hotel workers at the conference hotel where this conference is being organized. So a bunch of people have been scrambling to cancel their participation, to put their panels virtual, so we won't have to cross this picket line to do our job as political scientists. And it's a whole big thing. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than I just made it sound. But the point is that stuff like this, like figuring out how you can help other people who happen to be on the front lines now so that they'll help you when it's your turn, like that stuff does matter. So I'm really glad that I showed up when the QP workers are on strike, because those people are teaching my kids in school. I want them to be well paid. I'm really glad when the contingent faculty at my university are on the picket line. I will show up for them, because those people are going to teach my students when they're in other classes, and their quality of life affects my quality of life. So that stuff, like politics isn't just voting. There's electoral politics, sure, but there's a lot of politics that's not electoral, and unions for me are where it starts.
That's amazing. That's a great answer, man. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm so glad. I'm gonna play some 1930s union music as we play us out on this.
Excellent.
Yeah,
exactly. So I got a question. Where can people buy Not Here, Why American Democracy is Eroding and How Canada Can Protect Itself by Dr. Rob Goodman?
Oh, thank you. Well, wherever books are sold. So go to indigo.ca. If you're into Amazon, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it at your local bookstore. I'm going to be having a book launch at Queen Books in Toronto, which is an awesome local bookstore. But if there's not one near you, like...
What day and time?
September 8th, open to the public. I'll have an Eventbrite, September 8th, 6 to 8 p.m. if you're in Toronto, Queen Books. But otherwise, Indigo, Amazon, wherever books are sold.
Awesome.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the book is out August 15th, so it's out next Tuesday.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll try and get this out before then so we can tease it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And we really appreciate your time, and thanks for reaching out to us and coming on our weird show.
Yeah, man, we really appreciate
having
it.
me on. Thanks for
That was fun.
responding. This is great. Yeah, and enjoy the copy. The copy's going to be coming to you, and I mailed it a couple of days ago, so it should be good. It's going, they're both going to Reese, but
did you draw some dicks in it?
I didn't, but I did a little. I said this book, Canadian politics is boring, and this book is too. So I signed it.
That's amazing.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
It's nice
Good
meeting
talk.
you.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.